Hi, I am Dr. Damian Golvar. Welcome to Pasos. Pasos is a podcast that has as its goal to bring guest speakers from all over the world to discuss issues related to results and well-being in our organizations. It's called Pasos, that means steps. And the idea is each presenter share some steps that will help us to be more effective, that will help us to have more satisfaction and well-being in our organizations. So I am happy today to present my friend and colleague, Tony Madrid. He's a licensed clinical social worker. He has more than 70 years of experience working as a mental health in different organizations. And one of his areas of expertise is mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And his experience includes several years of serving as a psychotherapist, as a trainer, as a coach for several human services departments within the Los Angeles County. He's an instructor for USC Davis Center for Human Services, where he teaches human services professionals the skills of mindfulness to prevent compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. Tony also specializes in treating adolescents and adults with anxiety and depression in his private practice office in Los Angeles. So Tony, welcome to Pasos.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So thank you for joining us. And last year when we had our cycle of the radio talk shows, you participated also, so I appreciate you being willing to also participate in these video interviews.
Sure.
And our goal is to share with people watching these videos some ideas and some steps that they can take to be more effective in their organizations. And today, since your expertise is in mindfulness, I would like to ask you to share with us first, how do you define mindfulness? What is mindfulness? And then later some steps that people can take so they can bring more mindfulness to their lives and to their works.
For sure, yeah. So there are lots of definitions of mindfulness out there. And the one I like the most is that mindfulness is simply the act of openly and actively observing your moment-to-moment experience with a sense of curiosity. A curiosity that maybe a child would have. If you watch children go out in the world, they're just so mesmerized by the simplest of things, like flowers. They just spend minutes looking at it. And it's a quality of attention that is open, kind, accepting, and non-judgmental. So often when I speak with people about mindfulness, and perhaps they haven't come across it before, not familiar with it, I asked them to think about when they were dating someone for the first time, when they were in the honeymoon stage of that relationship, and how that changed their perceptions of the world. What was the world like when you're in that honeymoon stage of a relationship? And typically, people will say, oh my God, everything is wonderful. The sun shines brighter, and I just feel so good, and I really don't pay attention to my problems so much. I just focus on the good sensations. And so the second question I ask to go along with that is, if your partner that you're dating does something that would normally irritate you, how do you respond to that while you're in this honeymoon stage? And they often say, oh, well, I don't really pay attention to it. I'm really open. I accept it. It's not a big deal. I just really focus on the good time I'm having. So I say that's really a very practical way of explaining what having a mindfulness attitude is, because with mindfulness, you're open, you're accepting of everything. Even those times in your life where you're going through a difficult time. For example, I suffer from migraines, and they've gotten a lot better, and the way they've gotten a lot better is that I have been open and accepting of them, as opposed to resisting, which really makes the migraines and the physical pain a lot worse.
So a key element of mindfulness is being able to accept what it is instead of fighting it.
Exactly. So being very open, kind, accepting, and non-judgmental.
Yeah, now I would love if we could all be all the time in that state of being in love, like you were.
I know.
Like it would be that. Now, sometimes it's not so easy. So what would you say, like if I play here a little bit of devil advocate? So
yeah.
How do you bring? I personally believe that it is possible, and people who knows me know that I'm a pretty optimistic person, enthusiastic, that I always look at the positive side of things. but I know many people out there that have a lot of difficulties in doing it. So what would you suggest in these cases?
For people who have difficulty being non-judgmental, and maybe they're critical of their lives or things that happen in their lives, that they see the glass half full, so to speak.
Empty.
I'm sorry, empty, yes. Well, what I would suggest is really practicing being open and accepting of things that might be really easy for them to do that with. So maybe they do have an instance in their daily life that they like and makes them feel really good. So practicing really being open with that, and then moving on to situations that might disturb them or might make them upset, but they're not the really big ones, the ones that might even make them feel depressed or anxious, and then gradually just start to move that mindfulness onto the more difficult situations to really help them start to practice to be open and accepting of every situation. And mindfulness is called a practice for a reason, because it's not something that we can just turn on and off like a light switch, but it's something that requires practice, daily practice over and over, for us to be able to slowly change the way we view the world and the way we respond to things that happen to us in our lives.
So what I'm thinking also when we're talking about mindfulness here, we are talking about noticing things, what we are noticing and what we are not noticing, what we are paying attention to.
Exactly.
Not paying attention. So many times in the work, in mindfulness, particularly in organization, when we think, how do we can bring that? When we are part of an organization, how do we spend our time? Are we spending our time looking about what is not working, criticizing, judging, or also looking at what is working? How is this job meeting some of our needs? How, and sometimes, don't take me wrong, Tony, many times I tell people, maybe it's time for you to consider other possibilities. So sometimes the job is not the right place to be, or a relationship is not the right place to be. So it doesn't mean that we are going to accept any relationship or any job or any situation that can be really bad for us. But at the same time, is the opportunity, the possibility to pay attention with a different quality. This is what I'm hearing from what you're saying. Like it's a different quality of attention. And an example, tell me if I am right, like when eating, what I'm working on in mindful eating, like paying attention. So when we eat, most of the time we don't pay attention to what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
When we're mindful, when we're eating, we're paying attention to what we have in front of us. We look at it, we maybe smell it, we taste it, we spend time enjoying it, and so are more present and more connected to what it is.
Exactly, and I like what you had to say about really noticing where our mind tends to rest and focus on at work. It's really easy to focus on what's not going right, and then not just focusing on it, but dwelling there, like staying there for a while. And then after a while, we form, in mindfulness, what they call as attachments, where we just tend to hold on to this. And what that does is it really creates a lot of anxiety and stress and angst for us, as opposed to, like you were suggesting, really training your mind over time to also look at the things that work well in the organization, the things that are working on our behalf, the things that provide us with pleasure. And it could just be as simple as, a friend in the next cubicle that you look forward to talking to every day, and really noticing, welcoming in those positive feelings that come from having this friendship with someone in your office, despite whatever else is going, and training yourself to really explore what that feels like in your body and in your emotions, and learning to extend that experience so that your mind starts to balance itself out more than just focusing on what's not going well, what you think isn't going well in the organization.
Yeah, I was thinking, making a connection between mindfulness and emotional intelligence, and about the ability to really be present and pay attention not only to what's going on outside the world, but what's happening inside us. Like paying attention, that quality of identifying what are my emotions, what's happening to my body, what is happening with my thinking, like paying attention to information that many times we forget to pay attention to what is our body telling us, what is our emotions telling us.
Exactly.
Sources of information, but we need to be present to ourselves to be able to do that.
Exactly. Let me just also give a resource for your listeners. So there is a psychologist by the name of Rick Hanson, and he just came out with the book. It's called Hardwiring Happiness. And it's really all about training your brain to look at and acknowledge and accept all the positive experiences. And he talks about what we all have, which is called negativity bias, where because of our genes, our brains tend to focus on the negative aspects of our lives. And so he offers exercises in that book. One is called Focusing on the Positive, to really start to cultivate a mind that rests on positive experiences, not to negate the negative, but to create more of a balance in the way we perceive ourselves in the world and in the case of an employee and their work environment.
Now, Tony, how we can use some of these ideas of mindfulness to manage stress in the workplace or in our lives?
Mm-hmm. Mindfulness doesn't really have to be so stringent. We don't have to transform ourselves into longtime meditators or Buddhist monks or ascetics. We can begin to use little tools and techniques every day that can really start to turn our minds and to help us to be more open and accepting to everything that happens to us in the workplace. And I'll give one example and I'll tell a story. So one technique is to begin to train your mind to recognize what's going on with you in any given moment. So let's say that you are in a situation and there's something not right. You're feeling stress. Maybe your muscles start to tense up. And so to use that as an opportunity to maybe do a quick body scan, to ask yourself, what's going on for me in this moment? What emotions am I feeling? Am I upset? Am I resisting what's happening for me? And also to begin to identify the stories that we tell ourselves. So in mindfulness practice, they talk a lot about the stories that the mind creates about our situations that tend to amplify everything that we're going through. If we're feeling stressed, let's say at a level 2 on a 1 to 10 scale, our stories can amplify that to like an 8 or a 9. So I'll give you a quick example. When I worked in Los Angeles County, one of the departments there was a coworker of mine that for me was just toxic. So every week we would have this meeting we went to, and every week I would leave there with a migraine headache. On the way home, I'm like, oh my God, I can't handle this person. So when I learned about mindfulness, I really focused on this one particular concept that's called the unentangled participant. The unentangled participant. So basically that concept tells us that over time, by focusing on bare attention, or another way of saying bare attention is like the sensations of our breathing or the sounds in the room. So the more we focus on bare attention, the more we recognize the stories our mind is telling about a particular situation, the less entangled we become in these stories that tend to lead us down a path of anxiety and stress. So I decided to practice this. So what I did for myself is every time I went in that meeting, I would ask myself, what stories are you telling yourself about this other person? And of course, they weren't nice. And I was recognizing how my body responded to these stories. It would tense up. The tension would go over my shoulders and climb up to my cheek and into my temples, which would lead to a migraine. So I reminded myself to focus on the sensations of breathing and not focus so much on that person. And over time, it took about 2 or 3 weeks. And it sort of happened by surprise. I was driving home and I was like, wait a minute, I don't have a migraine. And it was such a nice surprise. I'm like, wow, this really worked. And it wasn't something like major I had to change in my life. It was simply practicing, training myself to recognize the stories I'm telling, and then instead of attaching to them, to let them go, to allow them by focusing on the sensations of breathing and not so much on that other person or the situation that was causing me stress.
So
So that's one technique.
to start wrapping up, Tony, can you share with us other techniques that can help us to develop these practices that you shared before? So one of the techniques could be what you're saying now about the story, identify what is the story that we're telling ourselves.
Yeah.
Attention to them, let that go. What would be other examples?
You know, I really like what's called taking a mindfulness break, and there's several ways to do that. One of the ways I do it on my cell phone is I downloaded an app where you can set alarms, and you can also, with the alarms, you can create little text messages that will appear on your screen. So my alarms go off about 5 times a day at set intervals. So every day at 10, at noon, at 2 o'clock, so forth, they'll go off. And so when I hear that bell, what I do is I take 3 deeper than normal breaths, and I really stop whatever I'm doing as long as it's not dangerous, like I'm not driving or something. And I stop and take 3 deeper than normal breaths. And I just try to recognize what's going on for me in that moment, in my body, what I'm hearing, just practice mindfulness in that moment. So taking those very quick mindfulness breaths really, for me, helps to reduce stress, because sometimes I forget to breathe. And sometimes I push myself too much, like if I'm working on the computer, that I forget to take breaks, even to use the restroom. And I've known that over time, if I don't stop that way of behaving, it leads to migraine headaches, it leads to stress, all of that. So these mindfulness spells that are very easy to program into your phone really help me to stop and say, wait a minute, I'm not going to live my work life, my work day on automatic pilot. I'm really going to create more of a balance even in my work day. So it's not all about doing and performance and outcome. It's also about taking good care of myself through these practical mindfulness-based tools. So that's another one.
Any last one that you can share, something practical for people that can take?
You know, for work, I would say, you know, practical things like going for a walk. When I worked in the county, I used to coach children's social workers on taking regular breaks, even just for lunch. A lot of them wouldn't take a lunch. They would just stay at their desks and, you know, shove a sandwich down their mouths while they're trying to do their work. And so what I would coach them on is, even if it's for 10 minutes, to go outside and walk around the building, you know, be very mindful about what the weather is like. Is the sun shining down on you? If so, how does that feel? Is there a breeze? You know, what's happening? Do you hear birds singing? So very simple things like that go a long way. And the other thing I just happen to have with me now is a here and now stone. So it's a stone that's shiny. It's been shined, that I keep in my pocket sometimes when I feel like I might be nervous. And I'm stealing the phrase "here and now" stone from one of the researchers, Kristen Neff, who's a self-compassion expert. So she taught me this. But basically, it's just something that you can take, and when you feel like you're getting stressed or anxious, you can pull it out or keep it in your pocket and just rub it and stop for a moment or two to really sense what it feels like. And you can even close your eyes to feel this really smooth surface against your soft skin. And that really takes you into the here and now, into the present moment. So things like that, very basic, very practical, that are ways to self-soothe and to take good care of yourself in the midst of a chaotic day.
Thank you, Tony. I think that these ideas are very helpful for people who are going to be listening to us.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to thank you for participating in this interview. If people want to reach you, how they can reach you?
Sure, they can go on the internet. So I have a website, and it's www.tonymadril, therapy.com. So tonymadriltherapy.com. You can send me an email. I have a blog on mindfulness, all of that.
Great. And I want to thank everybody who is watching this video. I hope that you find some of these ideas helpful and interesting. And I want to invite you to share this video with other people that you know that may benefit from these ideas that we shared today about steps for mindfulness in your life and at work. So thank you, Tony, one more time. And thanks for people.
You're most welcome.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.